Okay, well, that's good. Okay. We're going to use the mic, even though it's a small room, for the recording purpose. So I want to welcome you all to this information center information center session on doing research in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. This is an event we just kind of decided to throw together in the last couple weeks in response to all the requests that we've been getting from people about how to get involved in research. And so we hope this session you find useful, and we're also making a recording of it, so the slides and all the audio and everything, you can request that. We'll have that for you after this. So how many people here, just to get a sense of who we are, how many people here are in their first or second year? And then how many in your third or fourth year? Okay, good. So we have like about a 50-50 mix. And how many of you are chemistry majors? Bunch. And any BMB majors? Okay, looks like the rest of you. Okay, great. That's great. So one thing I'll say right from the start is that what we talk about today doesn't necessarily just apply to doing research in the chemistry and biochemistry department. It involves doing research all over Science Hill and on campus. So even if you're not one of those majors, or if you want to do research in an area that's slightly outside of your major, all of this is still going to apply. So sorry, I should introduce myself and Marla. So my name is Seth Rubin. I'm currently the faculty program director for undergraduate studies in the department. Marla Hesselink is our wonderful undergrad advisor. You've probably had a lot of interactions with her. And she, go ahead.
Unless you're BMB, then you've interacted with my counterpart, Rexton,
who's
not here right now, but he's in support of you all being here.
Right, yes, thank you. So Marla's in chemistry, and Rexton handles the BMB majors. And then we have a couple of other faculty and some undergrads that I'll introduce as we get to them, and they're gonna help me get to you all the information that we have. And then hopefully we have at least a good 20 or 30 minutes at the end just to field questions from you guys, what's on your mind about all of this. So I think we're going to start with Professor Peter Weiss. He's just going to kind of give an introduction to what is research, why you might want to do it. And so Peter, why don't you come up here and take it away? Yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm Peter Weiss. I'm a lecturer in the chemistry department. Yep. I've worn this a few times. And how many people are in a class with me now or have had a class with me? So you know me. I don't necessarily know you, especially with masks on, so bear with me if I don't remember your name. So anyway, I've been teaching in the chemistry department since 2011, and I also have a concurrent appointment as a faculty researcher in microbiology and environmental toxicology. So I have a section of a lab on the fourth floor of this building in environmental toxicology, and I study the environmental chemistry of mercury as a pollutant. And over the years, I have taken on a number of undergraduate students because I have this huge pool that I lecture to, 400 students every year, and often students just come up to me and say, hey, I'm looking for something, want to work in your lab, and I'm like, yeah. Anyway, through that process, I have worked with some amazing students, and the thing that I have noticed is the maturation, the getting involved in research and what it does to the student's trajectory. And then I see, because it's been over a decade now, I've written letters of recommendation for these students. They've gotten into PhD programs, gotten into medical school, and now they're applying for like faculty positions and industry and whatever. So it really strengthens for me my view of the importance of students getting involved in undergraduate research. I did that. I actually got my bachelor's degree from UC Santa Cruz in 1988, and I worked with Dave Klieger, right, who's still here. And one of my favorite professors was Gene Switkeys, who's also still here. So my ties to the department go way back, and that experience I had as an undergraduate researcher doing my senior thesis in Professor Klieger's lab really shaped and gave me skills that I then took on to graduate school and just became a lot more confident and really shaped my trajectory. So anyway, I'll be brief. Why is research participation important as an undergraduate? A few of these are my ideas, but I also leaned on some other members I'm on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for Science, and we have a student representative, and I asked them, and they gave me some helpful bullet points. So number one is really build identity as a scientist. There's a lot that goes into being a scientist, right? It's not just like lab skills, but it's how you communicate, it's how you carry yourself, it's the knowledge that you gain in your classes. It's a profession, and it takes a while to learn that. Being in the lab is a great way to learn it. Find direction for what you want to focus your career on. Who here knows exactly what they want to be when they grow up? No, you don't. I don't even know what I want to be, right? So this is a great way to dabble, to get your toes into something that might be new. You learn about it. It could take off, and that could be your career. Or you could be like, that was a cool experience, but now I want to do something different. So it's a great way to get involved in that. Discover applications for the concepts you are learning in your classes, right? I mean, you learn all this great theory from really, talented instructors, but like, how do you use this stuff? Well, you work in a lab and you might use it, so it's really exciting. Be a part of a community of people to look up to for inspiration and motivation. You'll often be working with graduate students or other undergraduates or professors, and this would be a great way to motivate you. Make it possible for your PI mentor to write a strong letter of recommendation. So if your mentor has details about the things that you have done, they can put that in the letter, and it makes a really strong letter. If they just know you from a class, even if you got an A+ in there, there's only so much that they can say. But if you've worked in the lab and actually produced things, then you're going to get a much stronger letter. Write a senior thesis, present a poster, and maybe get your name on a publication. It would be really good for your CV, your application to graduate school, and all that. Okay, there's a couple of undergrads that I've mentored, and I just want to announce as part of this DEI committee, if you are a work study student, and a lot of students don't even know if they have work study, so you should check with your financial aid. And if you do, then there's a new program coming online, dei.science.ucsc.edu. Check it out. You can get paired up with a faculty mentor, and there'll be more positions being created for this new program. So I'll leave it there. Great. Thank you. Oh, the mic.
Yeah, one thing that I'll just add to that is you've all chosen to come to a UC campus, right, as opposed to go to, let's say, a CSU or a community college, or maybe you went to a community college and now you've transferred. You decided to come to a UC campus. And really, the biggest advantage of being at a University of California campus is that they are primarily research institutions, that there's huge research enterprises going on here that involve PhD students and postdoctoral fellows and senior scientists. And in addition to the mission of teaching, the mission of this campus is to do research. But what that does is that creates so many opportunities for undergraduate students to get involved. And that's just a huge reason why you pay those extra bucks to come to UC versus another school potentially. And you really need to seize that opportunity. And the fact that you guys are here means that you're aware of it and trying to seize that, and we appreciate that and want to get you into a lab. And then the last thing I just wanted to add to Peter's comment about building science identity. There's more and more research now that actually ties success in the classroom to people identifying as a scientist. And it's a hard thing to do, as Peter pointed out, sometimes in the classroom, because all of this knowledge that we're teaching you, all these fundamental concepts, a lot of them just seem really abstract. And you're never really taught in intro chem or biology what it really means to be a scientist. And people find, though, that understanding what it means to be being a scientist and practicing science allows people to understand those concepts better and ties directly to performance in the class. And I've definitely seen this anecdotally over the years, both students that have come through my lab and reviewing applications for graduate school, that I've seen people struggle in early intro classes, then get involved in a lab, and all of a sudden they're getting straight A's. And it's because they can make those connections and start to identify as a scientist. So I think I just want to emphasize that's really, really important. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Alex. Now that we know it's important to get into a lab, he's going to explain how to choose one and how to do it.
I'll do my best. First, I want to say that I second everything that you just heard. And I'll just talk a little bit about the logistics. I should have made a slide, but I didn't. So I wrote some notes. So the question is, you've decided that you want to do undergraduate research. and you are at a UC. There's lots of labs doing great work. You look at a spectrum of all the labs, you first get overwhelmed, you're not sure what you're going to do. How are you going to actually make that choice? I have some pointers for you. I think there's no right answer to how you're going to make the choice of the lab. My first kind of pointer that I'd like to emphasize is, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? Why does it matter what you're interested in and what you're passionate about? What's going to be the thing that you're going to do the best work for? What is going to be the thing that you're going to be happy to get up in the morning and think further about? What is going to be the thing that's going to motivate you to stay late one night? Perhaps, don't tell anyone, come in on the weekend and think about some chemistry. It's going to be your interest and it's going to be your passion. And so I strongly believe that the lab choice that you make should align in some way with what you're actually enjoying thinking about. Maybe you took a biochemistry class, maybe you heard about a fun fact in the news, in a newspaper, maybe COVID is on your mind and you want to know who is making advances against COVID, studying some biochemical nature of some disease. And so I think it begins with your interest and passion. It doesn't end there, but that's where the thought process begins. How do you decide if you want to go work in a physical chemistry lab or a biochemistry lab and so on? What do you like thinking about? What has caught your interest in the studies that you've currently done? I mean, presumably you're all chemistry or B&B majors because you want to be chemistry and B&B majors. Nobody put a gun to your head and said, this is what you should study. Maybe your parents kind of told you, I don't want to see you at home unless you become a doctor or something, and maybe that's a different story. But I think your interest and passion should guide a lot of these decisions. It's not hard, or it's not complicated, rather. So think really hard about what it is that you love about science. What do you get excited to learn about? And imagine then you were able to pick a lab that then focuses on something that you enjoy thinking about. How much more excited and motivated are you going to be to get that work done? How excited are you going to be about learning the answer to a question that nobody knows the answer to? And you're going to be one of the few people pushing against that unknown frontier trying to break through. It's extremely exhilarating, and it comes from the passion and the interest that you ultimately show. What will interest and passion in the lab that you choose give you? It'll give you the motivation to get stuff done, to accomplish things, to provide deliverables, to arrive at results that somebody will be able to write you a strong letter of recommendation for, whatever you choose to do, whether it's graduate school, industry work, national lab, post-bachelor internship, whatever it might be. You're going to be driven to get stuff done, right? You're going to be driven to work hard, and that's extremely important. Science is hard, right? There's no ifs or buts around it. It's just, it requires a lot of work. If science was easy, anybody would do it. And so how do you get the will to do the thing that's hard? You really want to get it done. You want to be really interested in it. And so if it's the physical chemistry of electron transfer reactions that gets you, really excited in the morning, then that's what you should consider doing. And then you look around, you look at the spectrum of the labs that are doing stuff, you research their websites, and you see what aligns with your interests, and that's where that process begins. That's where the snowball kind of starts rolling downhill in some sense. And this idea of thinking hard and working hard is extremely important. You're not really going to get far unless you start learning to get into the habit of thinking hard, not just pressing buttons on an instrument, but generating data and then thinking about what that data means. There's no reason why that process shouldn't start at the undergraduate level as opposed to the graduate level. And also, accomplishing things that are going to be setting you up on other rungs along the ladder for the rest of your career. And the rest of your career is waiting to happen. It's only a few years away when the next big step you're going to have to take. So ask yourself, what is your goal? What do you actually want to do? What do you want to contribute to? What is it about science that you're really excited about? And that is a straightforward thing to drive your ultimate choice of a lab that you try to get into. Okay, so you've done that homework, you figured it out. You know what you're passionate about. You want to cure cancer of this specific kind, and you're interested in using structural biology to get at the final answer of getting there. And maybe you've identified Professor Seth Rubin as somebody that, whose lab that you really love to be part of, that you think you can do really great work in, that you're going to be excited to contribute to the overall research agenda that is shared among the lab. It's not just the person that is the PI of the lab, it's the whole group, it's the whole lab. They have a shared agenda that they're pushing forward. You're going to be part of that. That's extremely exciting, extremely rewarding too. What other considerations enter in? You've identified the lab. What if the lab is toxic? What if the culture in the lab is not one that aligns well with you? What if the mentorship is not there? These are all important considerations. And so the next questions you should ask yourself is, are there graduate students that might help mentor you? Are there other undergraduate students that might help work with you? So you have a community of learners, this idea that you're in this together and then you're together pushing against the frontier of science. I think that's extremely important. Will you have some access to the PI? I mean, professors are usually busy, not because they want to be, but because there's a lot of demand on their time. They would love to spend lots of time talking science with you. Is that interaction going to be available even sometimes? And so the mentorship aspect of it is going to be important. You're not going to come in having all the skills to be able to make an impact. Someone's going to have to help you get there, just like somebody helped your mentor at some point get there at some point in the past. So ask yourself, what reconnaissance, what spying can you do about the mentorship side to know whether this is going to be a fit for you? Are you going to be able to flourish in this lab, or is this going to be a lab where it doesn't motivate you, doesn't get you excited, even though on paper it looks fantastic, maybe in practice it doesn't? So talk to the students, talk to the grad students, talk to the undergrads. Do your homework, effectively. It's a big decision that you're making. Once you've done this, it's time to reach out. You've identified the lab. You've figured out that there's good mentorship opportunities. There are grad students, there are undergrads. You're not going to be alone. There's going to be a professor that is going to be excited to discuss things with you every once in a while. How are you going to make that connection? How are you going to reach out? I find this to be one of the most ill-defined things for scientific research. You know, it's fairly clear you're going to have to get in touch with someone in the lab and say, knock, knock, do you have room for me? How do you do that? You know, this is on a side, but pay attention to your email etiquette. You know, don't write an email that doesn't acknowledge the person to whom you're writing. Don't misspell the professor's name. You know, craft an email that sounds professional. It's remarkable how many emails I see that just should never have escaped middle school, and yet they're being presented as a professional offer to let you work in their lab. How do you think it speaks of you if you don't put in the work, the proper care to write a compelling email that doesn't have any spelling mistakes, addresses the professor properly, explains why you're interested in that lab, makes the case that you're passionate and interested so the professor can connect the dots and say, this is the kind of person that's going to be willing to think and work hard. Therefore, I'd love to have them in the lab. I want to contribute to their mentorship. I want to get them closer to becoming an independent scientist. But I'd love to see a sign of that, at least starting from the very initial communication. So pay attention to that. It's not a trivial thing that you're doing. You're making a first electronic impression. It's not a small thing. Get somebody to read your email for you if you want. But like an advisor. Absolutely. That's actually an extremely great service that you would provide to someone. I think they should feel very, very grateful for that. So there you go. There's a resource that's willing to give you a second set of eyes. Use it. Why not? What do you have to lose, right? Do your homework about the lab. You know, there is a website that often contains a lot of information, so you want to spend some time with that website. You don't just want to say, you know, I know your lab works on cancer, let me in. You know, it's probably more compelling to say, I was looking through your website and I saw that you're currently focusing on this specific research problem. I saw a couple of recent publications that have, you know, seemed like they've uncovered some really interesting results. Do you have room for a student that can help contribute to solving this problem? I feel really passionate and excited about it. That shows that you are the kind of person that's going to do your homework. You're going to put in the time. You're not just going to be some schmo off the street that's going to, you know, come in. Somebody's going to invest a lot of resources in mentoring you, and you're never going to show up, and you're not going to do what you're supposed to do. It's a two-way street, right? When somebody's making a commitment to you, they're going to help you, but they hope that you contribute to the lab. And so it's a relationship that you're establishing. And a successful relationship requires buy-in from both sides. It doesn't just automatically happen. And so it's easy to get that point across from the beginning if you just think about it in advance. Show that you've done your homework. It doesn't have to be, I read your last X papers in gory detail. I can tell you everything about every figure caption. Nobody cares about that. Do you have a general idea of what the lab does, what the recent results are, what is it currently working on? Show a little bit of sophistication as a training for your kind of, you know, later on professional life that you're going to have to show that anyway. So the homework part is really important. But also what's really important is this. Don't get discouraged if you get a no. It's easy to think that somebody has made a judgment on your ability to do scientific work if somebody says, I'm sorry, I don't have a spot for you. That's not the case. It is very often the case that you simply, you have asked something of a lab that may not have the resources to mentor you. Maybe a graduate student is about to graduate, and the PI would love to take you into the lab, but there's nobody to mentor you, and the PI doesn't have time. And so it's a real practical decision. I've had to make it. It's very uncomfortable. You would love to mentor students that clearly show interest, but if you can't, you can't. And so I know it's hard, but I think I would advise you to do your best not to take that personally. It's highly likely that there's going to be more than one lab in which you could imagine being interested in. And so just simply say, thank you for your time, I appreciate it, and then you start the search again. Happens all the time, and it's totally okay. I also think it's okay to consider looking outside of your home department. There's lots of really interesting science going on all over the place. People in MCDB might be working on problems that are chemical in nature that you could come in with your chemical skill set and apply it, and vice versa. And so don't feel like you necessarily have to stay in your home department. Maybe there's something in bioengineering that is super exciting to you, that you can make a compelling case that your current set of expertise that you're still developing will be a good fit for that lab. And then you make that case in that email and see where the cards land ultimately. So you have a lot of options to you. You're not, and consider your options, I guess is what I would say. I just wanted to kind of end, and maybe I'm going over time, but just really quickly I want to wrap up by saying how I picked my undergraduate lab. When I was a freshman, I had a professor that was not the primary instructor for the course, but kind of led the side discussion sections. And I really gravitated to this person's way of thinking, of explaining chemistry, of going deep into certain problems, really kind of highlighting the way they think about science, and that really kind of spoke to me. And that was a core reason for why I decided to do research in that person's lab. And so it was after I finished my freshman year and as an undergrad, which is not that common, but I was really drawn to the kind of science that person was speaking about, his ability to explain things and ultimately to describe the importance of the problems that he was working on. I also found myself gravitating, I didn't know it yet, to kind of physical chemistry, and so he was working on electron transfer reactions. I didn't know much about them. I was just a freshman that just finished his first year, but just something about them seemed really exciting and different, and I wanted to learn more. And so it was really like the core interest that drove my decision to join that undergrad lab. Was one of the best decisions that I made in my scientific career. I can draw a line from that decision basically to where I'm standing right now, because my thinking and my problems of interest were shaped very much by that original decision that I made. So I think with that, I'll wrap it up. I'm happy to answer any other questions afterwards, but I think that gives you a general idea, and wish you all the best. It's an extremely exciting and very privileged position to be in, to have the opportunity to do undergrad research. I really think you should all give it a shot. Okay. Mine.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So I assigned myself the task of talking about some potential funding opportunities to do research on campus where you can actually get money to do it. Why would it be important to get funded? As we've talked about and people alluded to, research does take a lot of time. To get a meaningful lab experience, you're talking about 15 to 20 hours a week is pretty much what most people are asked if you're going to join a lab. And that's just because you really can't learn techniques, you can't learn approach, you can't learn about the science that's going on in the lab if you just come in and dabble for a couple of hours a week. It really takes large chunks of time and dedication to thinking and doing the science. But time matters, and time is money, and a lot of us have to work. And so if you can get funded, actually get paid to do the research, the idea is that could potentially free up more of your time to dedicate it to it. So you don't have to have some other job, for example, during the summer. Money is also important to do the science. So a lot of the research, most of the research that you would end up doing is supported by grant money, usually external granting agencies giving money to do the research. And so there either are resources available to do things like buy equipment or buy reagents, but sometimes you might have a specialized project in the lab that there's not a lot of resources for, and getting your own resources to do the research potentially allows you to do more and do things you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it's always good to have a little bit of extra money for that. And then the last one of the great things that you can do once you get involved in a lab is start to attend conferences. And this could be large national meetings like the American Chemical Society meeting, or a specialized meeting in the field of the lab that you join. But it's really a great experience to go and see what a professional meeting looks like. And it's an incredible experience to try and present the work that you've been doing there. There's nothing more motivating. I've seen this time and time again for students to give a poster, get up in front of your work, and present it to people in your field who would be super interested in it. It's motivating, and it's a great experience to learn and practice how to communicate about science. And some of the funding opportunities that we'll mention, part of that is to provide resources so that you can pay for registration at a meeting or pay for travel to the meeting. So that's another really important use of funding opportunities. So what funding opportunities are there? I'm just going to highlight a couple and then direct you to a web page where you can find out more. And again, all of this will be available for you, so don't feel like you have to write down every website, and Marla or myself can also always direct you to this stuff if you email us. So one opportunity I want to tell you about is something that's come online in the last few years, and they're called the PBSci Undergraduate Research in Science and Technology Awards. And these are basically available to anyone, any undergrad who's in good standing and wants to do research. And the idea behind these is that it will you would apply for this towards the beginning of getting involved in a lab, and it provides $2,500 or up to $3,500 if you can justify where that extra money would be spent. And the thing about this is you do need to have a faculty sponsor. So when you would apply for this would be at the stage where you've done everything that Alex has said, and you've found somebody who will mentor you in a lab that you would join. You start to discuss a potential project with that investigator, that professor, and then you would write this proposal and write a budget and ask for some money, and then the division will grant you this money. And there's a lot of money available. I think they award up to 50 of these now they can do in a year. So it's really just a matter of finding a lab, talking to your mentor. The mentor will help you to write the proposal and the budget, and you do this towards the beginning of the project, and it will help fund the project. Now, that's a nice amount of money. You could go to a conference with that. You could buy some things in the lab. That's not really enough money that you could completely, let's say, pay yourself for a whole summer and dedicate it to being in the lab. There are other opportunities for that. So larger awards that could potentially provide you with stipend during the year or during the summer. And one rich source of those is something called collectively the UCSC STEM Diversity Programs. So there is a STEM Diversity office that runs this website, stemdiv.ucsc.edu. And this is an office that basically coordinates a number of externally funded programs on campus for doing undergraduate research. So these are faculty on campus have written grants to like the National Institute of Health to get these resources in order to provide stipends and other resources to undergrad students to do research. So for example, MARC stands for Minority Access to Research Careers. And I can't even remember off the top of my head what CAMP stands for, but UC Leeds, these are all individual programs that have resources for doing research. And again, they're all coordinated by the STEM Diversity office, and there's just one application that you fill out. And if you qualify, you'll get an interview, and if you qualify beyond that, you'll get placed in one of these programs that's most appropriate for your interests and your background, and then you're off and running in that program, and that program will help you to find a lab if you already haven't found one, or you may have already found a lab. So there's an application process. It's due February 12th, so you might want to start already looking at that. And again, ask Marla or me if you have any questions about that. Are any of you guys in any of those programs? No? No? Okay. So you don't have to be, but there's quite a few people on campus who are. Just a smattering of other things. You don't necessarily have to get funding. Like I mentioned just before, most of the research that goes on campus, the overwhelming majority of that research is funded by external awards. And those grants will pay for supplies and reagents. And there are possibilities that a mentor or professor that has a grant could also pay you to work in the lab from that grant. Usually this would happen over the summer, and I've done this, and maybe others have done this too, that if a student agrees to work full-time over the summer, and they've already had some experience, and the mentor is confident that you're going to be productive, they will often offer to just pay you a stipend over the summer. And again, that frees you up from having to work, can pay for your rent, can pay for your food, and you can live in Santa Cruz and dedicate full time to working over the summer. And I highly encourage that you do that at some point, is to be able to spend 40 hours a week in the lab if you can. And again, funds allows you to do that. Usually you'd want to be in the lab first as a volunteer before someone would agree to do that, but there's lots of resources available in the form of grant support to the lab. There's the Work Study Research Initiative that Peter mentioned at the beginning. I'll just highlight that again, show you the website again. This is a program that's coming online that's designed to use work study allocation that you have to work in the lab. And there's going to be a group of advisors and faculty advisors and staff advisors to place people into labs from that. So I'd go to that website. It's not quite online yet, but I think it's coming probably by the end of this year or early next year. There's a number of awards, scholarships, fellowships that you can apply for at the end, because they've kind of been earmarked for people graduating. So, for example, once you write a thesis, you can apply for a Deans and Chancellors Award. It's like $500 or $1,000 bucks, I forget what it is. And there's other awards, like in the chemistry department, there's this award that's been around for a while called the Teeman Award. And then this is just a way that you can get resources at the end as you're about to graduate to help you go on and do the next thing. Now, that doesn't help you now, but it's good to keep that kind of stuff in mind. And then there are national fellowships, scholarships that you can apply for to be an undergraduate student in the sciences. So one very famous one is called the Barrie Goldwater Scholarship. That's a national application process, and you apply for it, and if you qualify, they basically pay you, I think it's close to $20,000 or $25,000 a year now. That goes towards your tuition and living expenses. So you should be aware of those opportunities. They tend to be very competitive, but if you're somebody who's done really well in your classes and can already have some research experience, you could be really competitive for awards like this. So definitely be aware that those are out there too. So where can you find more information about all of this stuff? The Division of Physical and Biological Sciences has an undergraduate research opportunities webpage that I've listed here. And you can go and check that out, and they have a lot of funding opportunities listed, and you can search by discipline and lots of other ways to search and organize the material. It's pretty useful. Our department has an undergraduate research page that has some resources available. And then there's also this list of awards and student funding opportunities that you can find at this website as well. So I definitely recommend at some point you just check those out and just see what's out there, see what opportunities there are to get funded. Okay. How are we doing on time? 12:30. Okay. So we were going to have Jenny Freiberg come. Jenny was she didn't do her PhD here, but she did what's called a Postdoctoral Fellowship on our campus, where after you get your PhD, you go to a university and do a few more years of research in a different lab to gain more experience. And when she finished that a couple years ago, she went to this company, Unnatural Products, that's down on Delaware Avenue here in town. And unfortunately, she couldn't make it at the last minute, but she sent me the slides that she was going to show. And so I'll just go through them with you and talk a little bit about possibilities to do research at a company in town. So Santa Cruz isn't a huge city, but there are actually a surprising number of small startup companies that have opened up in town that are doing first-rate research and looking for interns. So it's worth being aware of these and potentially reaching out to these companies as well. So, for example, this company that Jenny works for, Unnatural Products, it's an early-stage drug discovery company, and they're pretty small, only 15 full-time employees. They're probably on that picture. That's the whole company. But they do already have 3 interns in chemistry and operations, and they're looking for a biology intern soon as well. So these companies do like to have undergraduate students come down and intern with them. So how do you go about doing this? A lot of this advice is probably similar to what Alex mentioned in finding a lab on campus, right? Figuring out what your interest is, researching the companies and what they do, figuring out how you could fit in, and then writing a well-crafted email to introduce yourself and ask if there are any opportunities. And so this is just a nice example of one such email that, again, I think you could use if you were writing to a professor on campus as well, right? Introducing yourself, having some short couple sentences that say why you're interested in that particular company or particular lab on campus. Talk about any relevant experience that you might have, or if you don't have any research experience, talk about something from a class that you found particularly exciting that's motivating you, and then be very specific about how much time you expect that you'll be able to have, and some information about yourself. So I just think this is a nice example of an email that you could write. And again, we'll have these slides available for you if you want. And also on here is a list of all of the companies in town that do look for interns. So you can see it's quite a bit, right? There's over a dozen there. So there are opportunities. You just have to seek them out and be aggressive about writing emails to them and finding some opportunities. Okay, so with that, the other thing that we wanted you to do is hear from 3 undergraduate students who are currently in labs. So they've gone through the process that you're about to go through. And we asked them to talk a little bit about their experience, why research has been meaningful for them, to kind of emphasize some of the ideas we talked about at the beginning and actually hear from your peers. And then also it would be great if they told what the process of like for them was to get into the lab and how challenging it might have been, how many of these emails they had to write, and what an interview maybe would have been like. So we'll start with Sam.
Okay. I guess I will be standing. Sorry, I'm not good with mics. Is it working? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sapna. I am a 4th-year MCD Bio major, so surprise. I got into my lab last year, so I've been working with Dr. Lorch for about a year, and I did come into research a little late, so I started my 3rd year sending out emails, and I think I sent about 20 plus emails and got back from 1 professor, so please don't get discouraged. It's hard. It's a lot of work. I guess I can start from the beginning of why I wanted to get into research and how I kind of went about it. I guess I'll walk, it's a little easier. So I wanted to get into research because I've taken 3 years of classes at UCSC, and I wanted to apply what I learned into a technical and practical aspect. So I was like, the easiest way to do that was to get into research, learn what I've been doing, and just do it. And so what I did was I researched a whole bunch of professors, researched on myself what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was passionate about. And so what I did was I went ahead, researched the professors, read a couple of their papers, and sent an email. And you're sending so many of these emails that writing one email from scratch sometimes isn't time efficient. So I suggest that you guys go ahead and get a template going, a general template, but make each template unique to that professor, if that makes sense. So have, hi, my name is this, and then go ahead and be like, I read this research, I want to join your lab because I'm interested in this, and attach your resume, and if you're lucky, you'll get a call back from one of those professors within that quarter. And don't be discouraged. I know a whole bunch of people that got emails back a year after their email was sent just because the professor wasn't ready. So yeah. What else? I study proteins right now, and I think one of the biggest things I get out of research is just the whole experience of being a scientist. I came into UCSC thinking I wanted to go into med school. I know a lot of people are like, I want to do this, I want to do that, and you miss a whole bunch of your life because you're just on that one path. And so applying and opening my horizons, realized that, oh, I like biology as a scientist. I kind of would want to pursue research in my life. And that just opened a whole bunch of doors for me, because in that case, you have interest in the biotech industry, you have interest in biological sciences, you have interest in biochemistry, which I never thought I would be a part of just because I hated chemistry growing up. So there's just a whole bunch of doors and opportunities that you open up for yourself if you open your eyes and get into a lab. It's a lot of work. Again, I'm going to repeat that self because it's discouraging when you don't get those emails back and all your friends are like, I'm in a lab, how come you're not in a lab? And if you're third or fourth year, everyone's already in the lab and you're just like, I'm so late in the business, it's too late for me to join a lab. It never is. It's just keep persevering and trying. It's a great opportunity, and I think the benefits do pay off the whole hard work because I've learned so much. You challenge yourself, your mentor challenges yourself. If you're lucky, you get to work directly with your PI, you get a great letter of recommendation, and you don't just learn the whole research aspect. They're there to help you with your CV. They're there to help you with your resume. They're there to help you grow as a scientist and as a person. And I guess one more thing I kind of wanted to add when you do end up emailing your professors or the PIs is CC those graduate students. PIs are always so busy, and graduate students are the ones that you're going to be working with most likely, and they're the ones that might have the time to read your email or be able to be like, hey, I am interested in you. Let me show my PI. So yeah.
That reminds me of another good avenue to go is if you've had interactions with a TA.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As you know, all the TAs, a lot of the TAs are PhD students in the department or in related departments. Hang around after discussion session one time and just start talking to them about their research, what lab they're in, and sometimes that can be your introduction to a lab as well.
Absolutely. And if there are undergraduate students working in that lab, CC them too, like build the network, build the connections. I was fortunate one of my friends was in the lab I'm working with and said that, oh, hey, she might be looking for someone. And I was like, okay, I'll apply. And just send as many as you can, The more you send, the higher chance that you'll get someone back from you. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Lana.
Thank you. All right. Let me pass it. Brittany. It's a little complicated.
I hope I can figure this out. Okay. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Brittany. I'm a fourth year, also an MCD bio major, double surprise. So I am a part of Dr. Raskatov's lab. So if anyone's taken Chem 8A, you may have seen him. I do work with peptides, and so we're currently focusing on building a peptide library. And I guess I wanted to say that my experience has been a little bit different than maybe what you guys may have seen like on these slides here. I was a transfer student, so I transferred in the middle of the pandemic, so it was a little bit difficult for me to kind of like make those, or I came in thinking that it was going to be really difficult for me to like make those connections. So I started off doing some research and looking into MCD bio research, right? And I was going through faculty and I was looking at what everyone was kind of focusing in, and I was like, okay, like I kind of wanted to do some work in genetics, so I was sending out some emails to genetics researchers, and I didn't get any emails back. And so I started to get a little discouraged, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Like, I'm a transfer student, time is ticking, And so I was like, okay, well, you know what, like, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. It'll work out. Like, let's just hit the ground running and focus on, schoolwork and stuff. So I started off with Chem 8A, and I had already kind of gone into this like knowing that I was going to go to my professor's office hours. And I had already heard like going to your professor's office hours is a really great way to make connections with them and to like kind of find out exactly maybe a little bit more about like their research maybe, or just get some more like insight into how their mind kind of works, to kind of see if maybe if you've already done the research before, to know like what they're doing in their lab, maybe you'll be able to see if that professor would be like a good fit for you as a mentor. So I went to Dr. Raskatov's office hours and kind of established like a good relationship for him to see my name, or see my face, know my name, and get my questions answered about the topics in lecture. And so he knew that I was kind of motivated already, and he had a chemical neuroscience journal club, and he extended the invitation for me and a couple of other students that had been repeatedly coming to office hours to go and visit and sit in and like see if it was something that we'd like. And the journal club was basically where you would take some neuroscience articles and you'd read them and dissect them, and then someone in the club would present and we'd all kind of like talk about the paper. I was like, I've never done that before. It seems really daunting, but I went in and I really liked it, and we ended up talking about exactly kind of the research that he was doing in his lab, and I really liked it, and I eventually started presenting papers myself, and he saw that I was driven, and he extended the invitation for me to come into his lab. So I've been doing that for a couple of months now, like actually in person, and doing the journal club for about a year. And I would say that one of the best things I've seen in myself is like my academic growth. I think chemical concepts have become a lot more easy for me to understand once you can like get it off of paper and like into your actual hands. And let's see, what other benefits are there? Of course, there's the benefit of like a letter of recommendation and, you know, actually getting that in-lab experience. And I know a lot of us, especially if you're transfers and you transferred during COVID, you may not have had that that hands-on like lab experience, and it can be like a little bit intimidating to think like, oh, well, a professor may not want me because I haven't had that like in-person lab experience. That's fine because you're going to get trained anyway. So don't beat yourself up if you haven't if you don't feel like you've like mastered those skills already, because eventually you will. And yeah, stay motivated, and don't be discouraged if you don't get any emails back, because I didn't, and now I'm in a lab, so yeah.
Oh no. Okay, once I stop dropping things, I'll come talk to you guys. I can do this. I'm in a lab. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. So I also transferred right before the pandemic, so I definitely felt the time pressure to get into a lab, but unfortunately I had no clue how to do that. Nobody in my family had been in a similar situation, like being in college and trying to look for that. So I had read a couple papers of Alex's. Oh, by the way, I'm in Alex's lab, so. And I'm a chemistry major. I had read a couple papers of Alex's, and I was a student in one of his classes, and I really wanted to join his lab, but I didn't know how to ask, so I just took another class with him. And then 3 classes later, I finally asked him if I could be in the lab and come to group meeting, and he said yes. So probably don't follow the way that I did it, because there are probably faster, more efficient, more surefire ways to do it, but it worked out for me, and I'm happy about that. For me, one of the main driving force of why I wanted to get into lab is that I wanted that hands-on experience. And then also, I want to go to grad school and recognize that having a letter of recommendation and having lab experience is really important for that. But I've been able to get so much more out of this opportunity than I even knew was an option. So from like a educational, like professional standpoint, I'm gonna have my name on 2 papers pretty soon. Those are in the works, which is really cool. I've gotten to learn a bunch of lab techniques that I never would have learned in any of my classes. I'm in my last year here, and there are things that I've learned in lab that I've never had to use in any of my classes here before. So it's really a great way to gain experience and expand your horizons past just what you're taught in a classroom. And then the other thing is that I've got a bit of I don't like public speaking very much. It makes me very nervous. So joining the lab means that I get different opportunities, like getting to practice public speaking, talking here, or in group meeting. And then personally, lab has helped me grow my confidence as a scientist way more than I ever thought it could. I'm lucky to work in a lab that really values having a collaborative learning environment, and that's been a really amazing space for me to be able to ask questions and share ideas without worrying that people who know a lot more than you are going to judge you for anything. because I always felt kind of that pressure, like asking questions in class or even in office hours. And the great thing about working in a lab is that you're all working together on projects, and that, so I work with different grad students or different undergrads, and we get to work on problems together and all share our ideas to reach one goal, which is a really amazing experience. So yeah, thanks. I don't know where to put this.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, please. Yeah, so the question is when are labs open, basically? And if you're trying to find 15, 20 hours a week, does it have to be 9 to 5? I think there's no one answer to that question. Definitely when you start in a lab, you're going to have somebody that you work very closely with to train you. You're not just going to get thrown into a lab and say, here, go work on this and figure it out. Right? So you're going to be working side by side with either a senior undergrad or a PhD student or a more senior scientist. And so you definitely have to work in the beginning according to that person's schedule. And then as you get more and more independent, it becomes a little bit more flexible. And there are undergrads who do come in on the weekends. There are safety issues. It's not good for anybody, an undergrad or a PhD student or even a PI, to be working in a lab by themselves. So you always want to keep that in mind as well. But definitely, as you get more experience, there's going to be more independence and more flexibility. And even at first, there could be flexibility, but you have to be respectful of the person that needs to be there to train you. Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add to that? No? Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure, it's a good question. Other questions? Yeah.
But you can't balance all the work in the lab with your classes.
Good. Balancing classwork and lab experience. Does anybody want to address that?
I'm gonna stay seated. No, it's definitely hard to balance 15, 20 hours a week plus 40 hours of classes plus social life, sleeping, cooking, eating. If you're lucky, you just talk to your PI or your graduate student. Talk to them. They're understanding. They know what it's like to be in school. They know what it's like to try to balance everything. So that's just one way. Talk to them. I think they'll be more than happy to cut your hours down to 10 to 15. Do part-time during the school week, and then you're back to full-time over summer. At least that's what happened with me personally. I was doing full-time over summer, and then school cranked up, and I ended up being like, I can't do these hours. You're not going to get me 100% in the lab if I'm here 40 hours a week, plus I have all these other classes. So yeah, just communicate. They're not as scary as you think they are. They all just want to help. You're helping them by helping yourself. So yeah. Do you want to add?
Oh, no, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, again, no, that's also why I always emphasize so much to try and get that summer lab experience, because, yeah, everybody gets drawn away from lab work during the school year when you have classes and tests to study for, and that 15 to 20 hours is a goal, but there's definitely no hard and fast rule. And the other thing I'd say is I've definitely seen, once you start working in the lab, usually there's desk space, and you want to just hang out there, right? Because you'll set up a little experiment, and there'll be some downtime, and you want to hang out in the lab to experience the culture of the lab. But it's also an opportunity that you can sit and study while you're waiting for your reaction to run or your bacteria to grow. So as you get more experience, you sort of figure out how to work in studying and lab work together. Other questions? Yeah.
How long does it take you, does it usually take you to know what goal you have within the lab? What sort of goals you want to have?
Yeah, so how long to get comfortable and to be confident in your goals? That's a good question for our undergrads.
So in my case, I had a graduate student who's my mentor, and we sat down and kind of talked about like how long until I graduate, and then what my goals would be in the lab. So what I would be looking to get out of it at the end, whether that's a poster presentation or a publication, or you want to write a thesis, something like that. And then just based on what my graduate student was working on, she and Alex were able to come up with a project that would work for me. And then once I finished that project, you get another project. I fortunately my mentor's always like, well, if you don't like this one, we can figure something out. Luckily, that hasn't been an issue. I like all the stuff I've worked on, but there's definitely some structure about what you would be doing, and you also do get to have a say in like what role you play in that case. It's just about talking with your PI and your graduate student about that.
Let me just add something to the last two answers, which I think were excellent. I don't think I need a mic. I yelled pretty loud.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave.
I think one of the keys that unifies the last two questions is this idea of communication and honest communication. If you have a mentor, you shouldn't be hiding things from them. They will understand where you're coming from, and just have that conversation. I'm worried about this. I'm not sure if I can do this. Help me think about this. Let's discuss explicitly what my role might be, what is reasonable, and so it's a discussion. It's not a rigid thing, but I think you should be ready to engage with your mentor and do so in good faith, and hopefully your mentor is good enough. Like Eris happens to have a fantastic mentor.
I do. I'm really lucky.
The graduate student with whom she's working with. I'm very lucky to have a fantastic graduate student that I think thinks deeply about mentorship, and I think that benefits Eris a lot. I would have loved to have had that kind of a mentor when I was an undergraduate. But there's a spectrum, and I think the important part is to be willing to have that respectful, honest conversation, and to be as flexible as you can.
Other question? Yeah.
How often there's a lab for that presentation in that meeting, and how long will it take to prepare for it?
I see. So the question is about doing presentations in the lab. That's going to vary from lab to lab, how often you present and the amount of time, but maybe we can get some firsthand experiences.
I have to do group meeting this week.
I actually had a lab meeting this morning. So we have.
I have a lab meeting right now.
Run. For my lab, we have our weekly meetings, and we just kind of talk about progression and talk about next steps. It's about I think ours typically runs like an hour and a half, maybe. It's like very brief, and then we have other meetings. If we happen to need some extra time with the PI, we can schedule some meetings. We're very fortunate to be able to have access to our PI pretty closely. So, and then let's see. Occasionally we'll have 2 meetings a week, but like they said, it varies. So, yeah, if you want to talk.
Like Brittany said, it does vary. Over summer, we had undergraduate and kind of in-person lab meetings, so that was twice a week, an hour and a half. School started, so we kind of got rid of the undergraduate meeting, and that was just a chance for the PI. We're a really small lab, 4 or 5 of us, so we get a lot of very direct relationship with the PI. So we had undergraduate meetings, and that was just for us to build a relationship with her. And then once you are physically in lab, you'll have weekly updates, what you did this week, and that usually runs an hour, hour and a half. So yeah, along the same lines of what you guys usually do.
Other questions?
I like the question from the very back.
Question from